Wayne,
Hello.
welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on this channel today.
It is my pleasure. I'm super happy that you accepted the invite. And well, you're now doing your PhD in IP and standards at the Technical University in Munich. So congratulations for the opportunity. You're also supporting us doing research part-time. So we're quite busy right now, but for the audience who are still don't know you, can you maybe tell us about your path? What brought you here so far?
Absolutely. I am born and raised in a beautiful and small country called Zimbabwe in the southern parts of Africa. And I was born in Bulawayo, which is the second largest city of the country. I attended my school, my middle school at Baines Junior School, and my secondary education at John Tallack Secondary School, which is a tiny mission school that is in a very remote part of the country. But I was very privileged to have attended school at this rural establishment because it really molded me and helped me to have the values that I have today. Upon completion of my secondary education, I was also very fortunate to land a position at the Midlands State University Law School, which is one of only two law schools at the time that I was attending university. During my time at the Midlands State University, I took a liking to intellectual property and telecommunications law. And upon completing my LL.B degree, I graduated as a conveyancer, notary public, and legal practitioner. After that, I went on to study for an LL.M, a Master of Law in Intellectual Property at Stellenbosch University, and I completed my master thesis with distinction. Thereafter, I went on to study. I applied to be accepted into the doctoral candidates list here at the School of Management at the Technical University of Munich, and I also applied for a research associate position in the chair of intellectual property and corporate law. And here I am.
Wow. Did you say two law schools in the whole country?
Absolutely.
I imagine there's a little bit more need than just being fortunate. What did you have to do? I mean, could you tell us a bit of the challenges that you face, maybe to apply, or any other challenges that you have faced until you came here?
I'm sure you've heard the expression, when life gets tough, you have to pull up your socks. Claudia, literally, my socks have been pulled up to my neck because there's been a lot of competition in order for me to get to where I am now. And I'll start you off with getting into John Tallack Secondary School itself. There was a very rigorous interview and entrance exam process, which really screened out a lot of people, and only very competitive students could make it into that secondary school. And once there, I can also recall challenges like not having enough textbooks for the entire class. And owing to the fact that the school was located in a very remote and rural part, there was not very good connectivity to the internet. And going further from this, I recall that after I finished school and had to apply into university, it was really difficult because a country of 14 million people having only two law schools can really point to the fact that it was extremely competitive. And the university only allowed 20 students per semester. Now, apart from getting in, staying in the law school was also difficult because of a cohort of 20 students who started with me in 2012, only 12 of those 20 managed to make it to the end in 2016. I went on, of course, to study at Stellenbosch, and Stellenbosch is an expensive school. And the only reason why I was able to make it to Stellenbosch was I got a very, I managed to apply for a scholarship from the Canon Collins Trust. And this scholarship was also open to several countries in Southern Africa, and I was one of the few recipients. And so I fortunately managed to make it to Stellenbosch and to study there and complete my studies. And finally, I think one of the most interesting challenges that I've had to face in recent times is moving to a new city, moving to a new continent, into a country where they don't speak the same language as me, and I have to adapt and learn how to live amongst the Germans and to speak the German language.
Wow. Yes, I can imagine. I mean, I recall the time I moved to Germany. That was 2 decades ago, and the beginning was kind of a shock. I would say Spanish, Argentinian, and German nationalities or cultures and ways of looking things are different. But that's what makes so interesting of being in a new country after that period is what you can learn from that experience and get to see other ways to look at the same things. So personally find it really gratifying. So tell us a bit, because you were talking about the connectivity that you were struggling sometimes in school, and I had to think about the topic of your thesis, which is IP and cellular standards, 2G to 5G in Africa. So can you tell us how you chose this topic? What brought you to do that?
Well, Claudia, when it comes to the thought process that led me to choose my thesis, I have to say, as I indicated, I've always been a fanatic and a lover of intellectual property from the time that I was studying for my first degree in law. And my realization is that we now live in a knowledge society. And so having an understanding of how IP regulates the governance of knowledge is, I believe, something that is a very important attribute in today's world. Standards now are particularly fascinating for me because I see standards as an opportunity for the most part. They are an opportunity for people and entrepreneurs and firms to be able to leapfrog forward in terms of technology by making use of these documents that we refer to as standards, which contain a vast amount of groundbreaking knowledge. So by studying these standards and by adopting these standards, firms can travel miles into the future, and they can become as competitive as the producers of these standards and the implementers of the standards. And so what really attracted me to the topic is I would like to really investigate the relationship that exists between IP and standards and how Africa can potentially take advantage of this synergy in order to advance its interests and the interests of the African people.
Yeah. Oh, very nicely said. And I look forward to reading your thesis. Let's start with the first part, with IP. How high or good is the IP awareness right now in Africa?
Well, as far as IP awareness is concerned, I have to say that there are very low levels of awareness in Africa. And the reason why I say that, Claudia, is it's a very, very common sight when you're strolling down the street in Harare or Bulawayo or even Johannesburg to see a merchant selling illegally duplicated copies of CDs and DVDs of music and movies, regional movies and also international movies and music. And a lot of the people who are involved in this illicit trade of IP protected merchandise are people who believe that this is a victimless crime. In my country, in Zimbabwe, a lot of times you see the police turning a blind eye to people who sell this type of copyright infringing material, who sell counterfeit perfumes and counterfeit t-shirts. The police really don't prioritize this. And I think it's because the levels of awareness are not very high.
Apart from the IP awareness, which are the challenges you see regarding IP in Africa?
Well, since we've spoken of awareness, I'll just dive right in and talk about some other serious challenges that I think need to be addressed. One of the first is the fragmentation of intellectual property regulation in Africa. As you may know, Africa has two regional intellectual property organizations. The one is called ARIPO, the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, and coincidentally based in Harare, in my home country. The other organization is called OAPI, which is the French version. It's called the Organization of African Intellectual Property. And it basically regulates and centralizes application processes for the French-speaking part of Africa. So ARIPO has a total membership of about 22 English-speaking countries, whereas OAPI has 17 French-speaking countries. Now, the first thing that you need to take note of is there is no harmonization between these two organizations. In other words, it's not clear how they cooperate with each other to regulate IP in Africa. Secondly, another issue that I would point out is that we have this problem of a lack of financing for intellectual property. There are no incentives from the government or from private stakeholders to sort of encourage small and innovative firms to invest more in intellectual property. And if you look at Japan, for instance, Japan really prioritizes investing in SMEs so that, because they recognize that SMEs are leading the charge as well when it comes to innovation. And finally, I would talk, because I know we have some time constraints, I would just talk briefly about the digitalization of IP offices. I think this would help because it lifts the burden on administrative staff.
Mm-hmm. Interesting points. Regarding the first one, I was thinking on fragmentation, and the first thing that came to my mind was also forum shopping. Are parties somehow prioritizing some jurisdiction for IP disputes or not?
Well, when it comes to forum shopping, first of all, maybe let me give you some statistics about how IP registration really looks in Africa, and then I'll quickly dive into litigation. So according to WIPO, in 2020, about 6,688 patents were registered in South Africa, and that is by far the largest number that you see in any other African state. If you look, for example, at ARIPO, which is responsible for registrations for 22 countries in Africa, it only records 754 patents for about an aggregate of 22 countries. If you look at OAPI, OAPI only shows about 479 registrations for the same year. And so by far, South Africa is a jurisdiction of choice when it comes to registration. And when it comes to litigation as well, I would say South Africa is the chosen destination. Now, as you know, patent rights and intellectual property rights in general are territorial in nature, meaning that you can only defend these rights in the territories where they're registered. And so we do see a lot of litigation relating to patents in South Africa, but mainly it's between local actors who have interest to protect in South Africa. But we don't see a lot of forum shopping. We just see a lot of litigation in South Africa in particular, because it's a jurisdiction of choice for registration in the first place.
Thanks for the clarification. Let's move to the standards. What do you think that cellular standards can bring to Africa? Which are the benefits?
I think the proper way to answer your question, Claudia, is which are not the benefits of cellular standards in Africa. Cellular standards are really bringing a lot of, I would say, revolution. They are revolutionizing the way that business is done around the world. And so I believe that they have a tremendous amount of impact that they can bring to Africa. And I'll only speak of a few examples. If you look, for example, at education, the COVID-19 pandemic really exposed how weak and fragile the African education system is, because once national lockdowns set in, school and academic activities were completely disrupted, especially for the little children who are not privileged or fortunate enough to have smartphones and handheld devices to sort of further their educational goals. And so we see around the world in other countries the implementation of hybrid and remote learning strategies. And that really helped advance the interests of education in other countries. And so I think cellular standards can really positively impact on education, for example. Let's look very briefly as well at healthcare. Africa has a very serious problem of counterfeit medicines and counterfeit drugs. And the World Health Organization reports that about 43% of counterfeit medicines are circulating in Africa. Now, with cellular standards, we are having new initiatives where consumers first scan the labels on these medicines to verify if they're actually authentic. And this can save hundreds of thousands of lives. I'll speak also about the possibilities that are enabled by 5G, for example, when it comes to remote surgery and robotic surgery as well. So I really believe that cellular standards can have a very positive impact on Africa.
I agree. I also read recently a very interesting paper you wrote on mobile money. And I think this is a concept that many in Europe might not know. So if you could explain us what it is and the role of cellular standards in it, that would be amazing.
Absolutely, Claudia. Maybe let me begin by a brief definition of mobile money. Mobile money refers to financial services that are provided using a mobile device. So we're talking about the opportunity or the capacity to send money, receive money, deposit money, or even borrow money using your cell phone without having to go to a bank or to an ATM. And in my paper, I talk about how this mobile money concept is only possible because of cellular standards such as 2G, 3G, all the way up to 5G. And it would interest you to know that in a 2021 survey that was conducted among 6 sub-Saharan African countries, 73% of Africans report that mobile money is really promoting economic development. According to some statistics as well, mobile money enables global transactions valued at $2 billion a day. In addition to that, 500 million mobile money accounts were opened in sub-Saharan Africa. This is very significant, Claudia, because 57% of Africans, according to a World Bank report, are unbanked, according to the World Bank as of 2020. And so I believe that mobile money can really be a tool to promote financial inclusion in Africa.
Wow, was 406 million.
460.
Oh, wow. That's a lot. So I'm glad mobile money is helping in that. So if you had a magic wand and you could change something related to IP in Africa, what would you change? How would you change it?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think if I had a magic wand, the first thing that I would change is the amount of venture capital and private equity firms in Africa that support IP. I've noticed that it is becoming a growing trend around the world to see venture capital firms and private equity firms investing more in SMEs and startups that have IP-bearing products. So for example, if you have a startup and you are specializing in a certain type of technology that has intrinsic IP value, then most times venture capitalists will invest and fund these kinds of SMEs. And we need this in Africa because Africa is highly innovative, but we don't have that private equity to support these small firms and these startups.
I see. We're coming, unfortunately, to an end, and I have 2 questions. Let's start first with future plans. What do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years from now?
Well, that's an interesting question because I always like to look into the future myself and try to figure out where I'm going to go. And I would like to stay in, I'd like to work in industry so that I build some experience relating to how cellular standards operate and how standardized technology is even developed in the first place. I feel that this could be very useful for Africa someday when I return to Africa to promote IP awareness. In that vein as well, I would like to go into academia as well, part-time, and to continue pursuing an academic path as a lecturer and as a professor, teaching, of course, intellectual property, teaching world trade law and standards as well. And I also would like to start a not-for-profit organization to help build awareness on IP by doing seminars, workshops with government officials, with SMEs as well, and with the young people so that they appreciate how valuable IP actually is.
That's lovely. I like it. Definitely will follow all your steps. And then my final question to you. Can you tell us about a lesson learned? So we all make mistakes. That's something that happens. And we can decide to see them as a failure or as an opportunity to grow. And that's why I like to hear about something that made you grow. And maybe we can learn also from that.
Well, looking back on my early days of my career, right after I had graduated as a legal practitioner, notary, and conveyancer, I had an opportunity to study, but this opportunity arose right at the time that I had my first paid employment opportunity. And being a young person, fresh out of college, having been a student for so many years, for 5 years, I felt I really, really wanted the money. So I chose paid employment over pursuing my studies and becoming a master in my craft. And I have to say, looking back, I feel that I ought to have chosen to study rather than chosen the money option, because money, in my experience now, always follows skills and knowledge. And so if you improve yourself, if you build on yourself, then you create a larger opportunity to earn for yourself.
Right. So it sounds like my mom used to say, invest on your education. Great. Also a very wise person, I have to say. So
Indeed.
thank you so much, Wayne, for joining for this interview. And thanks everyone here who has been listening. And more interviews will come on very exciting topics like artificial intelligence and open source and so on. And for now, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. And again, Wayne, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for having me. Hope to see you soon.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.